Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to see so many people joining this new format, this new series that we're starting with this talk. Um, yeah, the series really is about exploring how we can create workspaces that are more meaningful to a diverse crowd of people, make them a better place for everyone to feel like they can bring their whole selves to work, and look at this topic from a whole range of different perspectives. Yeah, again, my name is Lisa Junger. I'm a software developer, and I used to be a psychologist. Now I'm the regional D&I lead for ThoughtWorks Germany, so life can take many different ways. Um, and For those who don't know ThoughtWorks, maybe just real quick, we're a global software consulting company. We're specialized in creating custom software with and for our clients. And we're currently more than 7,000 people in around about 43 offices, or maybe a little bit more than that by now, I don't know, and across 14 different countries. So we have an internal kind of task of dealing with various forms of or dimensions of diversity only on the basis of that. We thought workers love creating technology and particularly acknowledge the power and responsibilities that come along with that. And they're a constant trigger for conversations about the role that we play in the industry, but also beyond the industry and in wider society as a whole. So that's kind of one of the starting points why also diversity and inclusion is a super interesting and important topic in our company. And it's kind of the trigger for conversations on a daily basis, I would say. I know some of our colleagues are in this talk and may shake their heads or nod, whatever. They're very a lot of different opinions that create conversations that are interesting and meaningful and create a lot of learning for us. And as technologists, we know that if we want to impact anything really, we have to build on the shoulders of giants. That means we have to share what we learn. We have to share what we see. We do that for tech a lot. We also do that for what we learn about diversity and inclusion, but less so. So this series really is a starting point, or one of the starting points for us to increase that sharing of our learnings around all topics, diversity and inclusion, our challenges, our learnings, our dead ends, all these kinds of things. And I think Amy can fabulously kick off that series by sharing her perspective on that. Around about 10 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, we, just as many other companies, realized that we had a nomination process going on for a global program, leadership development program, and just realized that there's such a low number of people not identifying as men on the list of nominations already that that we were kind of shocked by our own reality and started looking at gender particularly. So that's kind of where we have the longest track record and probably the most learnings. But nowadays in ThoughtWorks Germany, we're at 40% technologists and 50% regional leadership who do not identify as men. So we feel like we have made some way here. Obviously, there's lots of other dimensions of diversity that we only now, or even over the past years, start learning how they're similar or different, and how there's lots of learnings to tap into here. So yeah, the idea is to, with this series, to create a forum and a place to exchange and also learn from you and what you see maybe in your own organizations, or what the questions are that you're carrying around, so we can start exploring the space a little bit more. And having said that, I'm honored to introduce Amy Lynch, our fabulous keynote speaker for today. The next series, or the next sessions of the series, will feature two speakers along a similar topic. Today we have one speaker because we found that we wanted to kick off with like a more general theme and discuss about that. Amy has worked in technology and with technology teams for a long time and is now heading diversity and inclusion for ThoughtWorks UK. which is not enough said because she also drives a lot of our global initiatives beyond the UK. So we're really, really happy to have you, Amy, and we're looking forward to hear how you explore common barriers to inclusion and tips that we can take away from that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. And it's quite overwhelming. I'm just really excited to be here for the first of these sessions. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone for making time in your schedules to come and be part of this. I'm really excited about the plans for this whole event series, and hopefully I'll see you as an attendee at a future one whilst I'm listening and learning away. So I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. Here we go. Let me just check that I have shared my audio there as well, because I've got some fun audio things to come. Okay. So here we go. So thank you very much, Lisa, for the introduction. Made me blush a little bit. Thank you. So my name is Amy Lynch. I head up diversity and inclusion for our UK business within ThoughtWorks. And to Lisa's point, I do a lot of stuff around global as well. My pronouns are she and her. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you on International Pronouns Day today. So you might see that a few people, myself included, have put my pronouns in my Zoom profile. And I would invite anyone to do that, because it's really important that we normalise the use of pronouns. I've also put them on all my social medias today and in my email signature as well, just to let people know my pronouns, and hopefully just normalise it for people who perhaps use different pronouns, so that they're not being misgendered in the workplace. So there's top tip, cheeky takeaway before we even get into the presentation. So I was invited to speak, and I think I've got about 30 minutes to talk about barriers to inclusion, which feels like quite an ambitious task. So fingers crossed, we'll see how we go. But what I wanted to say was, yes, a lot of these are based on my experience here in the UK, and a lot of this is based on the technology sector in particular, but actually a lot of these issues are transferable to other countries, regions and industries as well. So it will be framed in that way, but you can easily kind of look at this through your own lens, whether it's geographically or otherwise. The hope for this session is that we will talk about some real practical things that every single person on this call can start doing straight away to be more inclusive for other people. So we're not going to talk too much about how you recruit and how you retain people, even though those things are really important. This is more about what we can do as individuals, certain behavioural things and little things that we've learned along the way. So hopefully that sounds okay. So why diversity and inclusion matters? I hope, because you've all joined, I hope that you see the value in diversity and inclusion, which is a good start. There are so many business benefits to having diverse and inclusive teams, things like increased productivity and innovation, just better retention of staff, and overall more profitability. But I just wanted to share a few examples with you of where diversity and inclusion has gone wrong, or actually hasn't even been a consideration at all. So this is framed through a technology lens. So this was an example from a few years ago where a passport photo recognition system would not accept this valid photo because it said the subject's eyes are closed. The subject's eyes aren't closed. It was just that this particular piece of technology wasn't tested on a diverse enough group of customers to be able to understand whether this was going to be an issue. So that was an example from, I think, 2017. What makes it worse is this is an example from this month. So the same thing is happening. This perfectly valid passport photo was not accepted because it looked like this person's mouth was open, and they had to explain why it wasn't. So this is another example of where the people building this technology and testing this technology are not using a diverse group of people to be part of that process. Not to mention, I don't know whether any of you heard about the racist soap dispenser in a bathroom. And this was discovered in a Marriott hotel, I think it was. And there was a couple of colleagues at a conference, and one who had darker skin tried to use the soap dispenser and it didn't work. The reason being that the sensor that kind of bounces light off skin to activate didn't work on dark skin. So the fact here is that, again, no one was involved in this process or even the testing of this particular product to show people that there was flaws in the design. And finally, the fact that Apple Watches only rolled out the ability to monitor your menstrual cycle in 2019. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say on that. So I think if there were more women or people who, people who menstruated, including trans men that were involved in the build of these products, it probably would be something that was included much earlier on. So these are just a few examples as to show why it is fundamentally so important that we have diverse representation at every part of every process, particularly ones that are going to be used by lots of different customers. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It's quite an old one, but I just love it so much. So Verna Myers is amazing. Please do find out more about her. She does absolutely awesome work and is currently VP of Inclusion at Netflix. So this really resonates with me. Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. So diversity is all good and well, but actually if diverse people don't feel a sense of belonging, they don't feel valued, they don't feel heard, then actually we're kind of missing the point. So I really want us to focus on that inclusion piece rather than diversity, because I think diversity and inclusion are words that are used more and more often, which is brilliant, but actually it's more about the actions behind it rather than the words themselves. So what I wanted to do was share something with you. So this is not my idea. This is something that one of our colleagues developed, who is our CTO of North America. She's called Rachel Laycock. She has been a software developer and worked her way up and has a really interesting career. But what I wanted to do was share a journey that she mapped out based on her own experiences. So this was something that she looked at her career, all the different parts in it, and she looked at factors that made her want to leave, and then looked at things that could have been really helpful for her at different parts of that journey. So along the top here, you can see all of these different parts of, I guess, a lifetime. So childhood, you go to school, you might go to college or university, or you might go straight into work. You've got your early, mid and late career, and then obviously you've got retirement later on. Pretty standard stuff. These were all of the different things throughout her journey that she recalled being problematic for her, making her question whether or not technology was the right place for her, making her think that actually a career somewhere else might be better suited. So we've got things like influences. When you're very young, you've got stereotypes that more often than not are not helpful at all. Biases, imposter syndrome, things like microaggressions, which we will go on to talk about soon. Unconscious bias, pay inequality. There's all these different barriers that many people face. And whilst a lot of this is to do with gender, it's through the lens of gender, actually a lot of these things are particularly strongly felt by people from minority groups. So these aren't specific to gender alone. And then here, are some of the things that perhaps saved Rachel, that made Rachel believe that actually this is the right place for you, technology is the right career for you. So things like grassroots programs, having visible role models, good support systems in place, things like flexible working, equal pay and opportunities, working for an inclusive company culture, things like leadership development opportunities. So hopefully this goes some way to map out that journey, some of the barriers, but also some of the really great things that can help people on their journey. So what I want to talk about next is 4 main things that I think all of us here on this call can start to do. So first of all, I'd like to talk about inspiring the next generation. So I've got some stats. I've stuck with UK stats because I knew we were expecting folk from Germany and Spain and all over the place. So I've stuck with UK because I couldn't possibly look at every single country. But go and have a little look at the stats in your country. So 35% of STEM, so science, technology, engineering and maths students are women. So 35%, it's not great, but it's not awful. However, today in the UK, only 19% of the tech workforce are women. So we've got 35% studying at university, but only 19% in the workforce. Now, if you layer on top of that, we've got 600,000, actually, we've got more than that now. But in 2018, the UK had 600,000 tech job vacancies, which was costing the UK economy £63 billion a year. And it's expected that the open vacancies for tech roles is about 800,000 now in the UK. So we've got this big gap where we've got lots of jobs and not enough people to fill them. We've got the few women who are studying for some reason not actually ending up in the tech workforce. And we're noticing that in the UK, young people studying computing at GCSE and also sciences like biology, chemistry and physics, they're also declining as well. So we've got a worrying situation where there's just not enough young people who are coming into the tech industry, young people at all, let alone women. So why is there a lack of women and other underrepresented communities in tech? I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. So picture number 1, what does a person in IT look like? So we've got this nice drawing and it says, he would be old and his hair would be overgrown because he doesn't care what he looks like. He only cares about computers. So this is from a 10-year-old. Might be justified, but this isn't what I see when I look around. This isn't the image that I see. I think, you know, Lisa mentioned some stats there around our commitment to diversity and inclusion in ThoughtWorks. This definitely isn't what I see. But unfortunately, this is what young people believe. Next image. What does a person in IT look like? So this is a 15-year-old student. IT equals suits equals boring. So if we're looking at why people are not, why young people aren't looking at tech and going, oh, wow, I'll be able to like build the future that I want to see and be involved in all these exciting interesting things and work with really amazing people that are going to get me thinking differently about everything, they're seeing these really negative stereotypes. Now, I don't know where they get this from. Stereotypes can take all sorts of forms. They can come from your own experience. If you have seen people that, you know, you would describe this way working in IT, then that can shape your view of the world. TV programs, films, I'm certainly seeing more positive representation of sort of scientific people in films now, but you know, that hasn't been the case for a really long time. So kids are seeing this, and this is building a picture for them about what you have to look like to work in technology. So for women or other underrepresented minorities, they just think, well, I don't see anyone like me. You can't be what you can't see, right? So I propose to everybody on this call, regardless of the role that you do, whether you are a technologist or whether you work in tech as a non-technical person or whatever you do, think about what you can do, how you can inspire the next generation, because we need them desperately. And I strongly believe that tech is a really, really great place for them to be. I certainly wish I'd known more about tech when I was younger. I kind of ended up here by accident, but I would have loved to have ended up here more intentionally. So there's a couple of global opportunities that you might have already heard of. Some of you might be involved in them. One is Code Club. So Code Club is aimed at ages 9 to 13. And basically, people like us will volunteer their time to help teach these young people how to code. There are over 13,000 clubs across 160 countries, and I think it's 180,000 young people learn to code each week through Code Club. One of my friends volunteered, and he said in his cohort there was actually a higher number of young girls in that session than there were boys. So I think you're getting in at that young age before people are told, you know, technology's for boys, not for girls, or you know, maybe you should go more towards like drama or something like that. We're getting in at a younger age to help engage these young people and show them that they can do it, and it's actually really, really interesting as well. So have a look. If you are technical, if you have any coding skills, that's an opportunity there. There's also another similar thing called Coder Dojo, which I think they are in about 114 countries as well. Like, these are really far-reaching grassroots initiatives that just need people to give up their time and skills to help inspire and engage with the next generation. In the UK, we've got a couple of specific ones aimed at getting women into tech. So one is called STEMETS, and one is called Code First Girls. And they're both super targeted on bringing girls closer to the technology industry so that they can get the skills needed and also get an understanding about what it's like to work in the industry. So wherever you're based, have a little look at what is happening locally and how you might be able to support. Something that I did, which was amazing. So I'm not technical, but I think to Lisa's point, I have worked in tech and with tech teams for a long time. So I know what I need to know to get by. But my background is in recruitment, and one of the things that I have been doing more is spending time with young girls, so probably around sort of mid-teens, who are kind of thinking about where they want to go with their career, literally spending time with them to explain to them what a software developer does and like what skills, like, you know, if you enjoy breaking things, then you might be a really good tester. Just trying to break things down into a really simple way. So you don't have to be technical to give back, but just think about how you could have a positive impact on the next generation. You know, go to your old school, go to your old college, university, try and get in with a local university to help them shape their curriculum so that the people who are coming out of education have the skills that they need to be successful in this industry. There's a whole bunch of ways that all of us can get involved and do a little bit more to fill some of those vacancies and really bring people into this industry and show them that it's not, you know, people who don't comb their hair and boring people in suits. It's just not like that. So yeah, call to action there. Let's all do a little bit more. If we all did a bit, I'm sure we'd get somewhere. So I mentioned microaggressions before. For anyone who's not familiar with this term, microaggressions can be compared to things like a mosquito bite, or a paper cut. So if you get one mosquito bite, oh, it's uncomfortable, it's a bit itchy, but you can survive. Whereas if you get 100 mosquito bites, that becomes really quite draining and more difficult to live with. So microaggressions are verbal or non-verbal behaviors that are almost like, they're not intentional, they're almost like throwaway comments, but that actually have a very long-lasting impact and tend to disproportionately impact people in minority groups. So an example of a microaggression could be constantly talking over someone or ignoring someone's contribution in a meeting. That tends to happen more to women and underrepresented minorities. Or another example could be getting someone's name wrong over and over. So this particularly happens with African names, and it's not really, well, it's not okay at all. My top tip on that is, if you find someone's name difficult to pronounce, just practice and eventually you will get there. What not to do is, don't say, oh, I'm just going to call you this name because it's easier for you. You just learn the person's name, even if it's one you're not familiar with. It could even, a microaggression could even be in like a team building situation. So if you have, you know, a member of your team that doesn't drink alcohol, but you go for like a wine tasting team building, that's a kind of microaggression, because that's not including someone in that team. Final example of a microaggression is comments like, oh, I'd have never guessed you were gay. And obviously that's not helpful, because you're making an assumption that people look gay when obviously sexual orientation is not something that you can see. So microaggressions are very, 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 they're very common, and actually often can be so small that you don't even realize they're happening. And even if it's happening to you, you kind of think, why do I feel this way? Oh, I should just get over it, it's going to be fine. But actually it can be really, really bad. So some tips of things that you can do when it comes to tackling microaggressions are the example I gave of someone being talked over in a meeting or ignored. Any one of us can amplify that person. So if someone isn't getting heard, then I could say, as this person has just said, why don't we try this idea? So just make sure that you're pointing people, you know, you're giving that space for people to contribute. Another example that I heard, which was really good, one of our colleagues who is a man, he works in a technical role, and he works alongside a woman who also works in a technical role. And another man came to him as a man to talk about technical stuff. And he said, oh, you're going to need to speak to Emma because she's the expert in this. And that is just such a beautiful way of using your privilege and pointing that person to someone who they perhaps might have assumed was not in a technical role or not the expert in that area. So really amplifying people is such a great thing that you can do. And I just can't recommend it enough. We talked about getting someone's name wrong. Just try harder. You will get it eventually. And we also talked about, the team building thing. So if you find that people are disengaged or people can't participate in certain things, just literally ask them, like, is there anything you would like to do? What should we try next time? Rather than constantly going to, you know, alcohol-based activities when there might be someone who can't participate as they might like to in that. So just ask people, ask the question. I think is a really good thing to do. So there's one thing that I do like to talk about, and I hope this translates into other languages as well, but please just humour me with this. So I want to talk about something that's very, very common in the UK. And that is using the term guys. So, hi guys, great to see you all guys. This is something that happens a lot in the UK. That is not a gender neutral term for a group of people. And whilst lots of people won't mind being referred to as guys, it actually can be really, really difficult. It can be a microaggression for some people who experience this a lot. So there's tons of other examples of words that you can use instead of guys. So I like to use folks and peeps. I'm trying to like own that because people think that that makes me sound a bit of a loser, but I'm okay with it. But just everyone, team, friends, people, like all of my emails, I'm just like, hi everyone, or hi all, because these are all gender neutral terms. And the moment I realized that this was something that I really ought to pay attention to, I was I was hosting a big conference. It was called Lesbians Who Tech. It was happening in London. And we probably had 350 people from across Europe in attendance. And two of the attendees came up to me in one of the breaks and they said, please, 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 can you just remind people to use gender neutral language, because it's actually affecting our ability to like engage with the content and the speakers. And I realized at that point, even though I personally didn't have a problem with the word guys, I realized that for these people to go out of their way to let me know that for them it was causing them a problem, that was something that I had to try and do something about. So I got on stage, reminded everyone that, hey, please can you make sure you use gender neutral terms? You might want to use these words instead of the word guys. Did that. And then of course, nothing changed for the rest of the event. So lots and lots of people kept using the word guys because it's so deeply ingrained in us. So all I decided to do at that point was I just decided to not use the word guys in my language. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to do that, but it was just something that I thought I just need to get out of the habit of using the term guys. So I now don't use the word at all. There was also a great example of a colleague who, by his own admission, he said to me, I never imagined that I would be like a diversity and inclusion champion, never. But he'd been to a workshop and we had a conversation around the use of the word guys. And it was a great conversation, loads of contributions from different people who had different experiences. And he then went to a training session, an external training session. And he said he just couldn't stop hearing the word guys from the two facilitators. And I think because he was more aware of it, because of this conversation, he couldn't ignore it anymore. And he decided at the end of day one, it was a 2-day training course. At the end of day one, he approached the trainers and shared with them that actually using the word guys might not be inclusive because of all of these reasons. And they hadn't even considered that that could be a thing that might be a barrier to someone. And they were so thankful, and they were just like, oh, we really appreciate that bit of feedback. We're going to try harder to use some of these different words. And he reached out to me and he said, oh, I've just done, he told me this story. And that was one of those things that I just thought, that's brilliant, because that's just helping other people understand that for some people, it might be an issue, just something to be aware of. And actually, you know, just reflecting on our own behavior and the things that we see around us, and having that opportunity to educate and share some insight is actually a really good thing. We can't change the world, and I wouldn't expect everyone to cut guys out of their language. That was just something that worked for me. But yeah, just kind of think about that, because that's a really common microaggression that I've found since I've started speaking about it more. It bugs a lot more people than I think I realized. So I think we just get on with it because we're like, meh. But the more you talk about it, the more you realize.
There are some interesting questions or comments or comment-like questions in the chat. I think they're all meant as comments more, but maybe picking out one because I think it's interesting, and adding directly to what you said, that even a lot of women are using the term guys a lot, right? You hear it so much everywhere that it just doesn't feel like a gender term to some, right? But then
Yes.
Not to others.
Yes, I watched, and I'll try and dig it out and share the link so that you can share it with attendees. But when I was prepping for this, I found a really interesting link about like the history of where the word guy came from. And apparently it came from Guy Fawkes, which was like this whole thing in the UK. Like, I had no idea, but it was a great clip, and it was about 4 minutes long. So I'm happy to share it with you, because yeah, I'm always having these conversations around whether it is gender neutral or not. My view is it isn't, but I know that everyone uses it so much, and I know that a lot of the time it isn't intended to be gendered. But, you know, I think the way I look at it is, if I am with a room full of straight men and I ask them, would you go on a date with that guy? They're probably going to go, no. And that's kind of my logic that I think about it. So yeah, any more things in the chat, Lisa, that you think?
Yeah, if we want to take them now, or you tell me if it's a better question for later, and like and it's extended conversation. But there's one question about microaggressions. Are microaggressions more prevalent in specific cultures, or is it a global phenomena distributed somewhat equally?
That's a really good one. I'm trying to think about my interactions with our global colleagues. So I know in North America, I know in the UK, maybe Lisa, you could speak more for Germany. I think in Spain, perhaps as well. But I don't know that I know enough to say it's global, but I think there are certain behaviours that we see happening in most of our regions, and it tends to be pretty consistent, but maybe plays out differently depending on, you know, what's happening culturally in different regions. But yeah, maybe we can discuss that a bit more later as well. Awesome. Okay, tackle your biases. So I have managed to cram an hour's worth of content into a training course on this. So to only spend like 2 minutes talking about it just seems completely ridiculous, but I'm just gonna let you know that this is a thing. We all have biases. We all have biases. It's not a bad thing, but we do need to be more aware of our own biases, how that might play out in us, in the workplace, in how we make decisions, and how we might be able to mitigate that. So I've got a very short video, which I'm hoping the audio works on. This is a snippet of a TED Talk that I've actually linked to at the end of this presentation. So if you do want to watch the whole TED Talk, you can, but this is like 20 seconds. It's an exercise, so I just invite everyone to just follow the instructions if you can.
From math, medicine, and...
Skip. Here we go.
Let's start with a brain exercise. I'm going to ask you to visualize 3 scenarios. The visualization part is very important, so please close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine you're late to catch a flight. You rush through the airport, you make it through security, you run to the gate, you make it down the jetway, you step on the plane just as they close the door behind you, and the pilot steps out of the cockpit to say hi. You get to your destination, you go to a local restaurant, and you have the best meal of your life. I mean, really enjoy this. There's no calories in visualization. And at the table next to you is a couple happily celebrating their anniversary. The next morning, you go to the biggest technology conference in the world, and the CEO of this year's hottest tech startup just took the stage to speak. Now, you should have a solid picture of all of that, so open your eyes, because I have some questions for you. In your mental image, was the pilot black? Was the married couple 2 men? Did the tech CEO on stage look like me? It's okay if one or all of your answers is no. Your brain creates images of what's familiar. It's less of a fan of what's not familiar.
I'd love to find out what people are thinking, but I don't think we've got time. But yeah, if anyone has any observations that they want to share in the chat that I can look at later, then that would be awesome. But I can tell you now that my pilot wasn't black, my couple weren't 2 men, and my CEO didn't look like this person in front of me. So I don't know whether anyone had any similar or different experiences. But I think the reason that I like to share that exercise is our brains go to what we know and what is familiar. This is where one of the many ways that biases come from, and it's not a bad thing. But some of these, the example that we've just watched there, this is why in technology, often when people are talking about a developer, they might assume that that person would be a man, or assuming that the woman should take the notes of the meeting, or assuming that a junior member of the team wouldn't be able to have difficult conversations with stakeholders, or even assuming a more experienced colleague will struggle to adapt and learn new things. So these are all things that are quite common biases that we see in the technology industry that actually I don't think are exclusive to tech at all. So biases exist, we all have them. A very quick look at the brain, very quick. So basically, the way that our brain works, at any one time, our brain is getting 11 million bits of information. It's only possible for us to process 40 bits. So our brain is very, very good at taking shortcuts. So, you know, if you pick up a glass of water to have a drink, your fast brain, so system one thinking is going, don't worry, we've got this. We know how to drink a glass of water. We know how to sit down and stand up. Your fast brain knows how to drive, you know, for people who have driven from one place to the other and not really remembered the journey, but you know that you've got to the other place. That's because your fast brain is going, we've done this a lot of times before. It's cool. We know what we're doing. Whereas your slow brain is where you are, you know, working out complex problems or filling out a difficult form, or if you're driving in bad weather, that's where your slow brain is like, oh, we need to concentrate more because we can't see what we're doing and stuff like that. So the brain is incredibly powerful, and we never want to stop that fast part of the brain from processing those bits of information. But what we do want to do is, when it comes to tackling our biases and making decisions, we really need to apply the slow brain and system two thinking to those decisions. So the one thing that I always say with this is, when you're thinking about unconscious bias, please, please, please remember, you are not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your second thought and your first action. So please, when I learned that, I was like, okay, everyone has biases. Everyone's going to make these assumptions, whether we want to admit it or not. It's the way our brains are wired and the way that we're brought up in society. You're not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your second thought and your first action. There's tons of examples how bias can play out in the workplace. You can have affinity bias to people who are like you. So people who are from where you're from, who studied where you studied. I have to be really careful if I'm interviewing someone with rainbow colored hair, because I'm like, oh, this is amazing, when actually I need to be like, I need to assess on skills and experience, not hair color. So that's a bit of a silly example, but it's a very real one for me. And, you know, there's bias against groups, the idea that women take care and men take charge, you know, that women will organise the social events, or women might go and, you know, have that conversation with the person to see how they're doing. So there's lots of ways that these biases play out in the workplace and actually can affect whether or not someone wants to stay in a company or stay in the industry as a result. So being an ally, this is a term that is used quite a lot, but it's very easy to say you're an ally, but you have to be an ally. So being an ally is about the action. It's not about calling yourself an ally and thinking that that is it. So here's a few things around allyship. So take on the struggle as your own. So I think something to think about is, how can you immerse yourself in lived experiences that are different to your own? I have learned so much. So an example is, in June this year, in the UK, that was Pride. Well, it was Global Pride. So you wanted to celebrate LGBT inclusion, but also at the same time, we had horrendous things happening to people of colour and the Black Lives Matter movement uprising more recently. And I realised at that point, I was conflicted because I hated the racism. I couldn't, it was really, really bad. But I also really wanted to celebrate LGBT inclusion. So for me, I realised that actually, was I hearing enough from queer people of colour? And the answer was no. I didn't follow queer people of colour on social media. I didn't understand about any of the challenges that they were facing. So that was how I spent my June, was trying to seek out different people outside of my usual network to learn from and listen to and amplify. So really think about, what don't you know enough about, and how can you find out about that, to take that struggle on as your own and to really understand how big an issue it is and how that plays out. Transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. So a great example of this is, if you get given an opportunity, if you're invited to come and give a talk, if you're invited to go and meet a prospective client, if you're if you're given an opportunity to go on a training course, brilliant, but please just think, is there anyone else who could benefit from that? Or is there anyone else's voice that should be heard? I was invited to speak on a Women in Tech panel, which is amazing. I care about that a lot, but the whole panel was white women, and I did not feel comfortable with the fact that there was no representation of any women of colour, and that experience and that voice would not be heard. So what I did was I worked with the organisers to find someone suitable who could give their expertise to that conversation, and that was absolutely the right thing to do. So but really stop before you get too overexcited about, oh, I've had this amazing opportunity. Is there anyone else who is better placed, who would appreciate that opportunity more? That's a really difficult one to do, because I think we get so flattered when we're invited to participate that we perhaps forget to do that. Amplify voices of the oppressed before your own. Share other people's content. Like, don't create your own. If other people are saying it and saying it well, then share that. Like, I cannot stress that enough. We really need to be giving credit where credit's due. Acknowledge that even though you feel pain, the conversation isn't about you. Very important. Stand up even when you feel scared. So this could be, you see a microaggression happening, you see some inappropriate behaviour, you see that someone is left feeling deeply uncomfortable. What can you do? This isn't about, if you don't feel safe, then that's also okay, but what can you do to support that person? What can you do to improve that situation? It's uncomfortable and it's really difficult. It's not easy, but it's really important that we get comfortable with that. Own your mistakes and decenter yourself. Fail fast. You will make mistakes. You will use the wrong words. You will get someone's pronoun wrong. It's okay. Move on. But what you shouldn't do, I'll use pronouns as an example. If you misgender someone, that happens. What not to do is go, oh God, oh, I always get it wrong. I just can't get this pronouns thing. I don't know why it's important. Oh, you can't say anything these days, can you? Don't say that, because you're centering yourself and your embarrassment, when really what you should say is, I'm sorry, correct yourself and move on. No drama, just move on. Understand that your education is up to you and no one else. Do your own research, follow people, listen, learn, read blog posts from different members of different communities, and really just understand more for yourself. Listen. I can't stress that enough. And don't listen to respond, listen to just hear it. Thank people for sharing, validate people's experiences. Please don't say, oh, well, I wouldn't feel like that, or, oh, I think you're overreacting. If someone has experienced something, just thank them. I can see that's really difficult. Thank you for sharing. That's it. That's all that needs to happen. So there's a little link here, Guide to Allyship. You can stick it in Google. It's a really great open source website that just has a few different tips on it. So please do check that out. And I think we're wrapping up now, or getting towards our questions. So to summarize, we've talked about inspiring the next generation by volunteering or giving back in some way. We've touched a little bit on microaggressions. We talked a bit about how important it is to tackle your own biases and the importance of being an ally. And as another one of my colleagues said, it's about being courageous, being open, being committed to learning, and comfortable with being uncomfortable. So finally, I want to show a very brief video, which it's 1 minute long. And this is the perfect example of how to do inclusion and why it's really important and the kind of impact it can have. So I will play this for you now.
I pick up a broken comb, run it through my thin gray hair. Though I don't have any plans tonight, I'm not going anywhere. Well, I should have seen this coming. Don't know why I'm surprised.
When the best of us steps up, our nation stands a little taller. We all play for Canada.
The captain's lie.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Amy.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much for sharing. I think there's already quite some interaction in the chat, which also thanks to everyone who's involved and just reads along there. I think it kind of shows that there's some inspiration here to take away from your talk. Yeah, exactly. Maybe just because it was also put in the chat, please keep putting your questions into the chat, and our lovely team will help make them, organize them in a way that we can work through them step by step. I think there was a bit of a conversation, just wrapping this up, because we started that question about microaggressions earlier, right? And then we couldn't really dive into the details. Just to remind everyone, the question was, are microaggressions more prevalent in specific cultures, or is it a global phenomenon, somewhat distributed equally across the globe? I think there was also some voices on the chat saying, I don't think I could feel safe being who I am anywhere really across, like, does this already radiate maybe the fact that there's at least some truth to that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the same everywhere, but maybe also the question on whether the fact that we have to experience microaggressions, or we have to be prepared to expect to see something like that, is that maybe already enough of a problem, because it changes our perception of how we move around.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're so subtle as well. So I think, when I've experienced them in the past, I didn't even know there was a name for them. So when I found out there was a term called microaggressions and it was explained to me, I was kind of like, Oh, so it's interesting because it tends to impact, and there is a link. So what I didn't show you is there's on the final slide of the deck that I've just shared, I've given a few different links, and there's an amazing TED talk in there by a Black woman who is also an anti-racism educator. She talks a lot about microaggressions there in her talk as well. But typically, microaggressions can really affect Black people of African and Caribbean heritage as well. So it's things like, can I touch your hair? Which is a very, very common one. And hair discrimination is something that I didn't even realise was as awful and common as it is. So I don't know. I think it plays out differently for different cultures, but I don't know globally whether it resonates. I think I'm probably going to have to do some homework and go and ask some of my colleagues so I can get a better picture. But yeah, it's I think it plays out differently for sure for different groups and different communities.
Cool, thanks. There's another question here from Hila, who asks, as a job seeker, 99% of the job offers I see are full-time, Monday to Friday, 10 to 6 or 9 to 5 or whatever, right? On site, maybe not right now, but generally, right? And then saying, if the tech industry wishes to have more diversity and inclusion, how come there are non-diverse job offers still?
My personal opinion is that companies need to realise that they have to be a bit more flexible and they have to be a bit more creative. And I don't think they're there yet. I think if a global pandemic has taught us anything, it's that all of a sudden all the jobs that couldn't possibly be done remotely can be done remotely. And within about, I mean, in the UK, it was about 48 to 72 hours they could be done remotely. So, you know, I hope that this rather bizarre, challenging period of time that we all find ourselves in has opened up the conversation more around, do we need people to be based in an office all the time? You know, do we need people to be online between this hour and that hour? I feel like I have more flexibility now that I'm working from home, and I have a bit more autonomy over my role. And I think that companies that don't respond to that, they just won't be competitive. They will lose people, they won't attract people, and there will be jobs for people who are looking for more flexibility. So yeah, I just think change needs to come, and if it doesn't, companies will be left behind, is my opinion.
It's a really interesting one, right? Because it kind of, let's see how it plays out, but it feels like maybe the real learning here is that we can sometimes make things happen that we feel are so hard to make happen. Again, diversity and inclusion topics, so often that's kind of the theme that you have as a start for a conversation, right? This is impossible because we've thought about this because and fair enough, right? From where we are now, it's probably hard to imagine, but then we also could just learning right now that some things can be changed more quickly than we'd ever imagined, right? So maybe we can try and lend on that learning a little bit in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting, just something on flexibility, and I'm quite happy to share this because I think this is possibly some of my own bias. But so I work part-time. I do 4 days a week, and I've been doing that now for about 3.5 years. I wanted to do it sooner, but I felt like I couldn't ask the question because I didn't have any children. So in my head, I believed that you could only work part-time or you could only work flexibly if you had children, because that's the only reasonable reason to ask for that. And it was so strange. I had the conversation and it was totally fine, and it wasn't met with any resistance at all. And then I worked part-time and it was the best thing that I've ever done. But it's funny that I think even we can sometimes put these barriers up for ourselves because of either our own biases or our fear of asking the question, not seeming like we're dedicated to a company or whatever. So yeah, I think just ask, put yourself out there, and maybe try and, you know, if you're seeing these job offers, maybe trying to have the conversation early on about, well, could I work flexibly? Could I do this? Because I know at ThoughtWorks, we might advertise it one way, but then have these conversations as part of the interview process. So maybe do that as well. See if you can negotiate a bit as well.
Yeah, it might also be a reminder on how important it is to have policies on some things, right? Just to bake something into written so people don't have to assume things from the end.
Yeah, good shout.
Cool. I have another one here. So Nora asks, I work in a tech company where all the male founders have been doing the same way for 20 years. I've been brought in to do some change, but not too much. I know that better productivity and numbers will help them come around, but I'm wondering if you have any tips on what else can I do to sway them to become diversity advocates faster.
Oh, that's such an interesting question. First of all, good luck with that. It sounds like you've got your work cut out. Change things, but not too much. So one of the things that I would recommend, and I think it's incredibly powerful, but obviously you know the context of your organization better, is reverse mentoring. So maybe the leadership team or the directors, I forget the language that was used, apologies, pairing them up with different people in the business. So these are people, it's not about seniority, like reverse mentoring is usually someone more junior mentoring a more senior person. But where it can be incredibly powerful is the leadership person can understand more about the challenges faced by, I don't know, a Black woman or a single parent or a Muslim woman, or do you know what I mean? There's so many different things. So I personally think that that's a really, really great way of just getting people to understand more about realities, because then they can understand more about how they can support people, right? And you could maybe look at framing that around, you could maybe think about a few different ways to shape it. So it's not just like a open conversation and anyone can say anything that they want. You might need to coach your leadership people to say, thank you for sharing this with me. Is there anything that you need to be supported, rather than, well, I don't think that's the case actually, because that wouldn't be great. But I would do that because I think that way that they can learn, and they're forced to learn actually, because I think it's very easy to sit in an ivory tower and say, oh yeah, we should care about diversity, so why don't we hire someone to make some changes but not too much. But we'll just sit up here and let them do the work and we'll not really change our behaviour. So that would 100% be where I would start, is getting them closer to the people to understand the challenges. I hope that helped. Was that all right?
I can't tell you, but maybe if we should go deeper, please speak up. Yay, thanks. That's what I read on the chat.
Oh, amazing.
Cool. Yeah, there's another conversation which I found quite interesting on the chat about neurodiversity. And I know you've also kind of worked around that topic recently in the UK. So maybe you can share a little bit, how you're approaching that, or what the group that's working on this is exploring in the space. Because I think it was a bit triggered by the question on how do we see disability, and is it always the person in the wheelchair, like seeing the breadth of the topic and the different ways in which this can manifest. And then the conversation went into the topic of neurodiversity.
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic, because I remember when we moved into a new office, we made sure we had gender neutral toilets. We asked all of our communities what they needed, and we responded to all of that as best as we could. And we had an accessible toilet that had the wheelchair symbol on it. And one of our colleagues, and honestly, I'd never even considered this before they shared it, but one of my colleagues said, I wish people wouldn't associate the wheelchair symbol with disability, because then people believe that that is what disability is when you're a wheelchair user. And the thought hadn't even crossed my mind. And then I realized I was guilty of that as well. And we agreed to just put some additional wording on the toilet that said, please remember not all disabilities are visible, as a kind of prompt to encourage people to just think about it before they accuse people of using the facility that isn't for them because they don't see a wheelchair. So that was quite early on in my understanding of disability. I've done a lot of work with some of our disabled colleagues and also some of our colleagues who are neurodiverse as well. And I think tech is a place where I think we probably have a higher proportion of folks who are neurodiverse, whether that is diagnosed or not. It might never be diagnosed. But I definitely think there is merit to understanding more about neurodiversity. So we have done a couple of things. We've got a disability working group and a separate neurodiversity working group. I know some people class it as the same thing, which I don't have a strong opinion against. But our neurodiversity group has done a really great job of helping us understand, what is ADHD? How does that play out in the workplace? What do people living with autism, what is that experience like? How can we better support them? So one of the things that we're actually working on with that group, and we plan to layer disability over the top, and also things like gender and race and everything. But we want to look at, from the point that someone's interviewing to the point that someone leaves, with all of the kind of review processes and starting new projects and all the different touch points that someone goes through at ThoughtWorks. We want to understand what barriers there are for people who are neurodiverse. So we know, for example, that, for some neurodiverse people, brightly coloured meeting rooms can be too stimulating. So especially if you're in an interview situation, that can just be really horrendous. In our London office, we had a tiny room that was made entirely of pink glass. And one of our colleagues calls it the artery. And they were like, don't ever make anyone sit in that artery to do an interview because it's literally sensory overload. But we only know this because we've fostered that safe space for people to talk openly about, well, actually, this is really difficult for me and for others. So then we just know that we have to change that when we have the opportunity to do it. I don't know whether that answered the question. I could talk for an hour on neurodiversity alone. It's such an interesting space, and there's so many different experiences within that whole group. But I think for us, it's been great to just foster the conversation and hear from people as to where are the barriers. You can do like psychometric tests as part of your interview process, can actually just be really unhelpful for neurodiverse folks. We actually got rid of one of ours because we realized that, what are we actually measuring when we do this test, or are we just causing people stress that they really don't need? So I think it's about looking at processes, things that you have in place, and why are you asking it, and can you just get rid of it?
And it's really interesting, right? Because there's so many, especially maybe in tech or any other kind of startup environment. I guess maybe this is me, assuming things, but we have a lot of kind of established cultural rules that, if you look at them, especially for a neurodiverse, like from a neurodiversity angle, can be super difficult. Like open space offices for people that are sensitive to distractions and noise, like must be absolutely, like triggering the entire day to having to work in that environment, right? And for other people, it's like, that's the reason why we come to the office, because all of a sudden you can meet so many people and you have all those inspirations, right? So it's really, I think it's really interesting to look at our cultural symbols and rituals and setups that are so profound in how they're not working for some groups.
Yeah, and I think, again, with the pandemic and people being able to work in their own space and set their own space up how they want to, I think that brings some benefits for people to be able to work in a way that suits them a little bit better. But as and when we might return to offices, if that even happens, I have no idea. But it's worth thinking about, are there things that you can do in offices that will please everyone? So can you have some open spaces? We, in our Manchester office, we also had some very private spaces just for one person. We had what we called a reflection room, which is just a blank space that people could use for praying, people could use for breastfeeding, and people who might be, you know, on the brink of a meltdown can just go and sit there until they feel that they're ready to come out of there. So it's just about thinking about what can we put in place that will help different people and how can we make that work. It's tough, but it's about asking the questions and really getting that input from the community, and just doing what you can, I guess.
Do we have time for one more? There's, again, not perfect. We have one more from Dominic right here. We're in the company currently in a culture change, and our target culture is aiming at some more open-minded, modern, basic keywords like ownership, partnership, and so on. I'm one of the culture agents organizing workshops to make that target culture transparent and work on how we can achieve it throughout the next years. Here comes the question. I really would love to bring up diversity and inclusion into those culture workshops. Do you have any tips on what would be really important thing you would definitely try to talk about with the team when they are in a culture transformation in the company?
Okay, I'm just reading also to make sure I've
Yeah.
got everything. Sorry.
I think the question is, when you're in a transition, in a cultural transition, right, and you're running workshops about company culture, how can you best kind of find a starting point to talk about diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. I guess a question back to that would be, do you have even a small number of people in your organization who champion it, who really care about it, who are visible role models for whatever, whether it's the LGBT community, whether it's around race and ethnicity or gender? Because if you have some, if you have a kind of team of champions, if you will, then you've got a few more people to help advocate and help have those conversations. Because that's one of the things that we did. We kind of set up an internal diversity and inclusion group. And it started off me and like 2 other people, and we would meet once a month. And it was fine, but we didn't get much change done. And now 3.5 years later, we're regularly 20 plus people, 4 members of the leadership team at every single meeting, lots of different representation of different aspects of diversity, to the point where I've now set up 10 working groups because we've outgrown this one big group. We've now set up 10 subgroups to try and break off and create more space to have these conversations. So yeah, if there's anyone else who can support you so it doesn't feel like it's all on you to have to bring it up, then that could be really good, because then you've got a few different people who are working with that common goal. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yes, reflection room. Sorry, I couldn't type that quick enough because I was listening. Yeah, I mean, maybe even, I have many questions for you, actually, to answer this question properly, but is diversity and inclusion a thing that is important? Is it something that you've done much about? Like, how do your colleagues feel about it now? Do you know what I mean? And just understanding where you're at and therefore where you might want to get to. Yeah, I hope that's helped. Fingers crossed.
Okay, I think there was no follow-up question. If you have follow-up questions, there's probably a way you can reach out and find us if you want to have a deeper conversation.
Anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn, by the way. If there's any questions, anything that you're not comfortable sharing in an open forum, like, find me and ask me. Just let me know that you are here.
Just looking, there's a few comments here. You can also read through them, I guess. especially conversations about the disability and neurodiversity question, I guess, still. Great. If anyone had put something that we missed for some reason, somewhere, please, unmute yourself and voice it, or just put it in the chat again, or point us to it now. Otherwise, I guess we'll start wrapping up. It was wonderful to have you all here. I'm passing the mic, the virtual mic, back to Charlotte for closing the sessions.
Thank you very much for this wonderful question and answer session. Thank you all very much for your important and really good questions. And thanks, Amy, for the great answers. I hope this had helped to get us some takeaways from this talk. In case you want to continue your self-reflection or inclusion journey, we have 3 questions prepared for you that you could take with you in this evening to the further days when you're working and facing some inclusion and diversity topics. These would be: what behaviors exclude people? What behaviors encourage contribution? And what can I or the team do differently? And these are just some nudges to think about, to reflect on yourself and to not stop learning on these topics, these topics. As we learned, this topic is very diverse and broad. So this is something from us for you to take away and to work on, and to remind yourself that this is important. Last words for today. We have called this an event series, so this doesn't stop with this event today. We have another 2 planned for 2020. They will be remotely due to the pandemic situation. We want to encourage everyone to participate and enable everyone to participate. So therefore, we will do this in a Zoom meeting. Again, we have them listed on our landing page. We will have them online on Meetup when the time has come. The next one will be on the 11th of November with our wonderful Christoph Hassler and Susan Henriquez. The talks will be about the invention of race and how diverse and inclusive is our workplace reflections. The other one will be to introduce Christmas time and the end of year time. It will happen on the 2nd December with Michael Riverte and Dr. Jay Harrison, focusing on how your organization to be LGBT+ inclusive, what can be done next. And the biggest thing I've learned from 20 years in technology, TLDR, inclusive teams deliver. We would be happy to see you all around again. Keep that in mind. Share if you liked it. We are looking forward to your feedback. Are really curious what you think about and are happy to see you again. Thank you.